So hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Claire Payne. I am the web librarian and liaison to the art department at Stony Brook University. And I am so excited to welcome all of you to this last in the spring 2022 Art in Focus series, where Shimon Attie will be responding to Techspressionism after our wonderful lectures of the last 4 weeks or so. So this Art in Focus Tech Tuesday lecture is co-sponsored by Stony Brook Southampton Library, the Pollock-Krasner House and Study Center, and the Southampton Arts Center in conjunction with the event exhibition Techspressionism Digital and Beyond at the Southampton Arts Center. And I'll put the link for that in the chat in a moment. And we would like to extend our thanks to Stony Brook's John H. Marburger III Fund for supporting this series. So just a couple quick logistics. We will open with our lecture, and then we should have time at the end for a little bit of Q&A. But until then, I will ask you all to keep muted, and I will jump in and mute you if for some reason you aren't muted. But you're welcome to put questions in the chat at any time, or you can raise your hand when we get to that point. So I would now like to hand things over to Helen Harrison, the Eugene V. and Claire E. Thaw Director of the Pollock-Krasner House and Study Center and the coordinator of this series, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you for all the help that you have given us in putting this series together. Since it's gone virtual, it's been a real pleasure working with you, and I look forward to the fall series, which will start in September. But right now, we are wrapping up our Tech Tuesdays with Shimon Attie, who is an internationally renowned visual artist whose work spans photography, video, site-specific installation, public projects, and new media. I can't think of anyone more appropriate to comment on the Techspressionism exhibition. Oh, and I see we have the curator here, Colin Goldberg, and I hope he'll pipe up a little bit later on when we have our Q&A. Now, Shimon is a recipient of the Pollock-Krasner Foundation's Lee Krasner Award, and he was awarded the Rome Prize in 2001, a Visual Artist Fellowship from Harvard University's Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Studies in 2007, and a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2008. And he's just completed his 2-year term as the inaugural Charles C. Bergman Visiting Professor of Studio Art at Stony Brook. And it's been a real pleasure working with him over these past 2 years. Now, Shimon uses both traditional and experimental media, including immersive multiple channel video and other digital tools. And he's going to give us an overview of his artistic practice and also respond to the Techspressionism exhibition in light of technology's expressive potential for reimagining relationships between space, time, place, memory, and identity. Welcome, Shimon.
Well, thank you, Helen. That's a lovely introduction. I'm wondering how all those different things you mentioned, how old they make me, but we'll skip that topic. Anyway, it's a very hot day, probably where all of you are, as where I am, and thank you for attending. The remit that I received from Helen and Colin was to basically break today's hour-long presentation into three aspects. I'm going to do a very quick introduction to some of my projects that use technology. I'm going to respond to the Techspressionism exhibition, which mostly is going to involve my posing a series of questions. And then we're going to have a little bit of a conversation and Q&A. So without further ado, let me do screen share so we can get to my perfect. Now, let's open this up. I don't know why that was asked. So, okay. And then let us, let us start. So this is actually, excuse me very much. Here we go. Okay. Responding to the Techspressionism Digital and Beyond exhibition. So I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to move quite quickly because the main thing we want to talk about is not me and my work, but rather my response to the exhibition and the issues that the exhibition poses. Some of you may know some of my work, some projects yes, some projects no. This is my early project, The Writing on the Wall, with slide projections in one of Berlin's former Jewish quarters, of street photographs that were taken at these exact locations in the 1920s, between like 1920 and 1932. Like this image here is a color photograph of a building with a black and white slide projection of the Hebrew bookstore that was located right there in 1930. So, and it's also kind of a period piece because these weren't even video projectors I was using. This is the early 90s. These were Kodak carousel slide projectors. So as it relates to a lot of work that uses technology, they are also of their time, and they are marked by the technology that is available at that time. But the other reason that I'm showing you this project is that it is very much content driven. It's not about the technology or necessarily even projected imagery per se, but it's about the issues and the content that resonate with these projections in terms of the former Jewish residents of this neighborhood, most of them having been deported to death camps during National Socialism just a few years after these projections were made. I originally come from photography, so it's very important to me to be the person who makes color photographs or black and white photographs of my installations. And I intend for the photographs to live on long after the installations are over. This is an early project I did also in the 90s with underwater light boxes. It was called Portraits of Exile. There were 9 very large underwater light boxes with 9 portraits on them. That's a jellyfish, by the way. These are detail shots. Let me just scrub forward. Half of the light boxes were of Danish Jews that were rescued in 1943 by Danish fishermen to Sweden just before they were to have been deported to Nazi death camps. 95% of the Danish Jewish community was saved. The other half of the light boxes, such as this one, are portraits of then, this is like mid-90s, present-day refugees living in Denmark who were not given such a helping hand. They were not given such a heroic welcome. Refugee from the former, from Pakistan, living in Denmark at that time in the 90s. This is a refugee from the former Yugoslavia, living in Denmark with an entry stamp on her passport limiting her residence period where she was allowed to stay in Denmark. So as you can see, the aesthetic component was very important to me. I'm not really, and I explained this to Helen in one of our initial conversations, I don't really consider myself a technology person because I know technology people and I'm not one of them. In many projects, I use technology, but I try to have it be seamless and invisible. And it's not really to show off the technology itself. It's more to hopefully achieve some kind of experiential state in the part of the viewer, which actually is not that different from the stated aims of the Techspressionism, which we'll come back to. This is one of the light boxes during the daytime. They were about 8 feet by 8 feet by 3 feet. This is before LED technology existed. They each weighed 1,000 pounds. Here you see all 9 of them. The Danish Parliament building is right to the right. And it was quite a marine engineering challenge, putting it mildly. How do you get 1,000-pound light boxes not to float to the bottom, nor to drift off? So that was really something. In any case, this project was also very much content driven. I was sort of weaving together 2 human rights stories. One, the kind of heroic, larger than life. I didn't mean to leave this, excuse me. The heroic, larger than life rescue of the Danish Jewish community by Danish fishermen in 1943, kind of larger than life, epic, widely mythologized. with a much more ambivalent present day response to refugees of today. Now, this is from that project was from the 90s. It's even much worse today in Scandinavia and in Denmark than it was even then in terms of xenophobia.
In some ways, most wonderfully, when it gets to
This is my New York City project, which
it's
is
going
in history.
Shimon Attie is preparing to make his mark on Manhattan. Over the last 4 months, he's talked to residents about their memories of the neighborhood, as well as their own stories, superstitions, and dreams. He spent more than 2 years planning a laser art installation that will take place here in the heart of the Lower East Side, an area influenced by generations of Jewish, Hispanic, and Chinese immigrants.
I very much respond to spaces and to places, and by temperament, I'm very interested in memory. And how do we give visual form to something so, on one hand, so intangible and ethereal, but on the other hand, something very real for us.
Shimon found his answer with lasers. Words made of light scroll across the architecture in real time, moving from building to building. Fragments of thoughts, poems, songs are all made visible on the street, some in English, others in Yiddish, Mandarin, or Spanish, the languages of this community. It's a major art project that required a lot of coordination and backing.
We couldn't imagine a better marriage for public art as
That's
really
Ann Path
stunning
Pack,
the public with
now
great
the director of the
visuals
Brooklyn
and
Museum.
providing them with content
Then the
that was
director of
incredibly
Creative
thoughtful
Time.
and appealing.
Shimon says that the lasers help animate his project.
The quality of laser light mirrors how memory itself functions. Lasers, they're very intense light, very focused, so they appear to have a presence, and yet, after all, it's just a light source. It's much more like a ghostly kind of writing, as if a ghost is writing out of thin air. That's the visual effect that I wanted.
This is high-tech public art at its most public. Anybody, it seems, who walks through this neighborhood and sees this art installation ends up staying.
Some of the things, you know, are very touching, like someone saying that they live so poorly in a tenement, you know, and the conditions were so bad. And I know that these people come. This population has grown up in this area and have come from bad times.
And this is really a wonderful change, the fact that you could display something in art in a very simple form and in a very easy form, I think, and people could see it in a very clear and in a very beautiful manner. I think it's wonderful.
I think it's going to cause a lot of the people that live in the community to just look differently at the buildings that they live in.
For 2 centuries, this part of Manhattan has been home to many different groups of immigrants, but that's changing as affluent young professionals move in. But Shimon Attie hopes his laser art will help keep the older memories alive. Damien Fowler, BBC News, New York.
Now, I shared that project with you specifically because I wanted you to, I wanted to give you a window into how I think about technology. I approach it from the end backwards. What aesthetic effect do I want to create, which is most fitting for the content and the concept, and what technology would be most effective in doing that. These are just some still photographs. I mean, that BBC piece was good at showing the write-out technique, but it was less good at showing the actual laser write-out animation technique that we developed. Facts on the ground. This is another very, you know, some of my projects have been very high-tech. Some have been very low-tech, like my Berlin project that I showed you a few minutes ago, or this project, which is more recent in Israel, Palestine, Facts on the Ground. Very DIY, very low-tech, custom-made light boxes with a generator off camera frame. And they're site-specific. They relate to the Israel-Palestine context, conflict, history, problematic, tension, etc. And each of these are designed, they were conceived for specific sites. This is what most of the world would call an illegal Israeli settlement in the West Bank, with my phrase, wild and urgent. This is the site where the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated in 1995 for trying to make peace with the Palestinians in the form of the Oslo Peace Accords. This is in Tel Aviv. all of one's fears. On the left is the ruins of a mosque, basically an archaeology site. On the right is what synagogues look like in that part of Tel Aviv, that's southeast Tel Aviv. In my intervention, all of one's fears, a problem of logic, a problem in logic. This is the Israel-Palestine separation wall. This project is more recent and was more technology intensive. I received an invitation from the St. Louis Art Museum to create a new exhibition, a new work of art. And many of my pieces are very influenced and inflected by the situation in which I'm creating the work, or where I'm creating the work. And the very first thing that occurred to me, or that struck me in my early research, was that the St. Louis Art Museum is essentially equidistant from the Mississippi River of Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn fame and Ferguson, Missouri, where Michael Brown was murdered by the police. So that was sort of in my artistic imaginary. What you're looking at is not a raft, but it's a sculpture. It's a epoxy resin sculpture of a raft. Yet it has a rotating police light on it. And then this is a still from a 6-channel video surround. I think what I'm gonna do, this 2 or 3 minute blurb describes it much better than I can in short order.
Our current exhibitions are a series of contemporary art shows by individual artists, and we're opening currents 113 with Shimon Attie, who has used the literary and social history of Missouri and St. Louis and the Mississippi River as the basis for his work. It's titled Lost in Space After Huck.
When the viewer walks into this space, you are in a dark, immersive environment with a large cast sculpture floating in space in the center of the room, surrounded by a 6-channel, almost 360-degree surround video installation. The sculpture is made from cast resin, so it's very, very tactile, and it's reminiscent of the Huckleberry Finn raft. But then there's a rotating red light, which one could interpret as being a police siren light, an ambulance light, a public safety light. It's deliberately intended to be a bit ambiguous and to raise questions without providing the answers. And the video comes from NASA nighttime photographs. It's almost like being in a planetarium. You feel like you're looking up at these stars and constellations in the nighttime sky all around you, and they're moving very slowly, like they would in a planetarium. But slowly, a larger, denser cluster of lights will start to come into one of the screens, and then you realize, oh my, I'm not looking at the sky at all. I'm looking at a city from above. In fact, we're in the sky looking down at American cities and small towns and also rural America at nighttime. My intention was to create a piece that had enough poetic.
Okay, that's enough on that. Hold on a second. Let me just give you, you can get a little bit of a better flavor, like from my own documentation. The video, the 360 surround video lasts about 14 minutes, the whole piece. We spent 3 months just animating these still photographs of American cities shot at nighttime, NASA photographs. There was a soundtrack that you can hear, and 4 cities would come in, each one successively larger than the one prior, until I was just cutting into the video itself. Until they would, let's see, that's the second of 4 cities. And then they would be obliterated by lightning, and then we'd start all over again, maybe in rural Wyoming, you'd see individual streetlights, and then it gradually gets more and more dense, more and more urban, and lo and behold, there's another city. I'm just moving right along. Some of you might have seen this project or read about it, been aware of it, my project Night Watch, which was here. This is a really great little summation. It was a floating media installation, that's what I call it, in the waterways around New York City, and then later in San Francisco Bay. With silent video portraits of 12 New Yorkers, 12 individuals whose lives have been saved by being granted political asylum by the US government in recent years, in spite of our former president. So it was a very high resolution, a very large LED screen on top of this on top of a barge and tugboat, very kind of anachronistic mode of transport. So I was very pleased by the synergy between the two. I hadn't really expected. I might refer to this reflection in a moment elsewhere. And so the barge would travel, and then it would stop at pre-publicized locations where the public would read it, but they'd also see it moving along the shoreline, but they wouldn't catch the entire 9 minute film in transit. So you can see how my work, even though I use technology, it's very driven by content, and it's very driven by, what I might call eye candy. I mean, I'm an artist, so I like to make pieces that are beautiful to me to look at. And each of these 12 individuals had very horrific stories. They look fine, but their life stories are devastating. In terms of near death, beaten by mobs, fleeing for their lives. She was a judge in Russia, and her life was threatened. Oh, here's a little bit of a clip of the actual film on the barge. I'm just showing you two people. It opens with that James Baldwin quote. Here you can get a better sense of the production values. And just one by one, they approach the camera. They're looking at us, and we are looking at them. They're looking at us, and we look at them. And then it cuts to another person, and so on. This was an unaccompanied minor that was apprehended at the border without her parents. And at the end of the piece, there's a little bit of some context that's provided. For the millions who've been forced to flee their homelands to escape violence and discrimination. For the fortunate few who've been granted political asylum in the US, 12 of these individuals appear in this piece. We don't need to do San Francisco in the sake of time. Let us move on. I think that's good for that. I'm gonna actually skip something I was gonna show you just because I see it's 6:28 and I wanna move on. Sorry for this. Okay, so here we go. Thank you for your indulgence. Turn this off, play. So first, a definition that many of you probably are familiar with, and maybe even had a hand in crafting, the term Techspressionism. an artistic approach in which technology is utilized as a means to express emotional experience. That's definition number one. Number two, a 20th century artistic and social movement, which from the reading that I've done is that kind of aspirational. That is the aim and the hope. So as a respondent to the exhibition, it's incumbent upon me to raise this question. Yet how do we evaluate whether a work of art that makes these claims to use technology in order to express emotional experience achieves those aims? It's very complicated. It's extremely subjective. And almost every single question or position that might be implied by my questions can be contradicted by numerous artworks that completely go in the other direction, that are very successful in the history of let's say, art from the 1960s to the present day. I will say that except for one or two pieces, most of the works of art in the Techspressionism exhibition were 2D in nature. Whether that be video, moving image pieces, or prints, photographs, monotypes, screen prints, etc. There were a few exceptions, but mostly it was works of that nature. So here is my, so as I looked, I pulled out the images that I responded to right away. And I should also say that obviously there's not time to give a platform and to present all of the worthy pieces in the show. So I was kind of in a situation where I was forced to select. But here's my own subjective set of questions and considerations that impact my responses to various artworks in the Techspressionism exhibition. In other words, I was forced to stop and think, why? Why this one? Why that one? Why this one? Why that one? So here are some parameters that I thought of. Does the artwork engage the human body, meaning the viewer's body? I mean, if we think about it, there is very little emotional expression potential if our own bodies are not engaged in that. Does the artwork engage the spatial, the X, Y, and Z axes, or does the piece only live on the surface? Of course, it's hard not to think about Clement Greenberg and how what he would say about that question. Does the artwork stimulate the tactile? For me, tactility is extremely important. And obviously it relates to the first issue, the engagement of the body. Does the artwork engage in a dialogue with the material, the sculptural, and the relationship between digital and analog means of production? So rather than just solely being about the digital, is it also about the relationship between the analog and the digital, the material and the digital, et cetera, which I find personally to be richer? Is the artwork both of our time while also transcending the confines of our current moment? Does the artwork, and here you see my biases, does the artwork skillfully incorporate the use of luminosity, transparency, and layering to achieve some of the miscellaneous qualities noted in much of the above, thus creating effective digital collage? Does the work truly use technology solely as a means to an end, thereby taking a backseat to content and aesthetics? Or does the piece fall into the trap of effects, whereby the technology calls attention to itself and becomes an end in its own right? You know, of course, I think of someone like Nam June Paik would put that second question to shame. Okay. Put differently, does the utilized technology remain relatively invisible, or does it become a substantial portion of the artwork's content or message? Last two, does the artwork refuse the seduction of design and hypersaturated colors that many digital artworks fall prey to? Finally, put more simply than any of the above, do I find the work to be beautiful and poetic, however fraught those terms might be? So I'm just including a few works that I responded to from the show. This is Tor Burrell, who I hear from Colin today is a high school student. It's called Funky Flux 2022, time-based NFT, digital video. And there's both a spatial quality to this piece, the sense that these fibrous elements are almost floating in front of, and that the blue orb is transparent. There's light shining through it from behind. This is Roy Nicholson from his 24 Hours series. It's etching with oil plate and oil pastels on Arches paper. And again, I respond to this because it's almost like, for me, it's like a membrane, looking through a membrane. The lighter areas in the back feel like they are some kind of liquid floating behind. And these tubular structures feel like almost like veins on the surface and many layers in between. So it kind of checks many of the boxes that I respond to. It's spatial, it's tactile, it's a nice use of luminosity and transparency. This is a detail, well, it's not a detail shot, I guess, but it's one photograph of many, one image of many, like a grid series by Felix Rothschild. Elsa, digital monoprint on aluminum. I enjoyed it for a number of different reasons, but mostly because it engages the sculptural. It's almost like a 3D rendering or a sculptural rendering of the human subject. Bernard Bousquet, the title is 4054 Digital Still Image. I responded to this because in fact it's tactile. You know, even though it's highly pixelated, and kind of the sort of salt and pepper kind of pattern to it, the folds of the curtain feel very material. A couple of paintings by Dan Weldon, mixed media on paper. I like Dan. I know Dan's work already, and I respond to these two for the reasons I stated, and in addition, they feel very painterly to me, and almost like they're dialoguing with abstract expressionism. Gregory Little, Old Delhi at Dawn, acrylic rice flower wood, archival inkjet on wood, basically mixed media. The layering, the luminosity, the depth. I mean, for lack of a better word, I'll say perspective, which is kind of dangerous to use that right here, but it's the sense that there's I'm being pulled in, there's a world within, and it doesn't stop at the surface. Alessio Sana, Geometric Tales. These feel very material to me. They feel, you know, they almost feel like they have a material substance. Of course, they're very dimensional. They begin in the foreground, recede in the back. They begin in the foreground and recede in the background. They move in and through the picture plane in a way that pulls me in. Steve Miller, I find this image quite simply to be beautiful. And it incorporates many of the qualities that I spoke about in addition. And it's beautiful to look at. It's very, for me, it's very gratifying, very satisfying. Colin Goldberg, I also find this piece to be very beautiful. And the layering, those sort of, I'm not sure what material the darker grid patterns are. They're not grid patterns, but they're almost like they're drawn on, appear to be in a picture plane that's in front of the quote unquote painted plane behind it. This is an older piece, 3 variations on a poem. Hold on a second. No, why do I not? This is John Zeman. And I don't want to get too much into the content, very important. Maybe it's, excuse me, I think I might have. I responded, and I have to confirm who the artist was. I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't really screw that up. I thought I had the name and everything. Here, yes, it was John Zeman. Thank you. I remembered correctly. I included it because I just think it's beautiful to look at. And it, I like the muted, thank you for being patient with me. I like the muted pastel color palette, the engagement with poetry. Yes, I'm aware that it utilizes technology of its time, but that for me, it's done with a light touch, a light hand, not a heavy hand. This is Karen Lafleur, Dance. I'm pretty sure this one was silent. If there is a soundtrack to it, it did not make it onto the Techspressionism website. And again, I very much respond to it for all the reasons I've stated. It's space, for starters, it's very spatial. Visual elements are existing on different picture planes. And why is that so important? One could ask. For me, I guess it's important because that's what helps me engage my own body. I see a space, I imagine a space, I could walk through that space, I could touch that space. This one is sort of a wild card here, because it's obviously very effect oriented. I mean, it clearly reads as effect. But what I enjoyed was the left third of the left 40% of the video, where these stripes kind of cohere into what appears to be sort of like physical forms, only to then disintegrate. And to me, that was also very much about the dialogue and relationship between the digital and the material. And what do we have here? This is, oh yes, this is double exposure. This is Tikoi Gutenbrouwer, Dutch artist. Double exposure with the iPhone 12. Although it looks like it's multiple exposures. I responded to it because for me, it wasn't about the technology. It feels like it's more about narrative and poetry, in a sense, and the technology is kind of the least of it. And last but not least, Nina Yankowicz's Unsung Shiro, Emily Nother Tempting Fate, Then Through Now 2022. It's a kind of a long, the content is I wish we had time to go more deeply into the content, but it relates to a female scientist, Emily Nother, who really never got her full due in terms of the history of science and mathematics and physics. And it's sort of an homage to her. This is just a still image. And of course, I respond to it because it is using technology, but clearly in the service of the content. So now I think what I need to do is I need to end screen share and come back to all of you. Let us see, stop share. And here we are. So on that note, I'm all yours for Q&A and conversation and whatever you would like to discuss.
Well, I must say, Shimon, I think you had your work cut out for you with 90 artists from over 20 countries to choose from. But I think that what it showed me was a certain consistency in your vision, although the imagery was very different in many different respects, but your responses were very personal, very subjective, not unapologetically so, as they should be, which I think is very helpful for people trying to get over, how do you interpret this technology? What does it mean? What it means is what you feel it means. And getting to that feeling is the most important step to appreciating what Techspressionism is all about.
Right, exactly. I mean, very well put. And with that series of 9 questions that I posed, that was my way of trying to create a map for me in terms of what helps me have an emotional response to a work of art. And those are some of the parameters. So Helen, do you want to field some questions from the chat, or you're the boss, however you want to do this?
I don't see any questions in the chat right now.
You don't, okay.
Anyone who wants to, if there are people who want to raise their hands or put something into the chat, that would be fine. I can do a gallery look and see if anybody has a raised hand. No, I don't see one.
I see 2.
Oh yes, I would say Roz. Yeah, I see Roz. And well, let's start with Colin, because he's really the boss here. So.
Well, I wouldn't use that term. In fact, I would rather not use that term at all. But I really appreciate the feedback, Shimon, and I also enjoyed seeing your work. And I think much of what you said, it really sort of reinforced my own understanding of what Techspressionism is for myself. That is, it's really work where technology is the medium, not the message. It's, it's a foil to terms like digital art and new media art, where essentially that becomes sort of, I don't know, I feel like it's work that happens to use technology by people that happen to have been born around this time period when the personal computer was born. I think that, for me, like the way that you selected the work was very sort of, like Helen was saying, personal and intuitive. And I often think, for me, a successful work of art is something that makes me stop and look at it when I'm walking through a space. And it's, and a myriad of other factors contribute to why I might have stopped at a particular piece, but generally it's those pieces, and sometimes it's that they're extremely disturbing or extremely beautiful or make really great use of the media, but I think it's really interesting to hear what you had to say. And I've found that through the process of this project developing, and I appreciate also that the second part of the definition is aspirational, which it completely is. I mean, to me, the word movement is something that's very loaded, and other people started sort of using it before I was ever even comfortable about, including it as part of the text. But I think, like you said, it's aspirational. And one important part of it is that it's something that's based on self-identification. So, like all of the people who have been added to the artist index were personally asked, do you want to be added to the index through social media or email, or they're recommended, and then myself or Renata, who's now our Instagram curator, sort of, ask the person. And I think that that's an important differentiator, as to, comparatively to things that have come before. And I just wanted to get your feedback on that idea and how you think it, how it relates to artistic movements in the past, as far as, sort of the way that they come to be.
Are you referring, Colin, specifically to the aspirational intention and desire that Techspressionism become a sort of its own canon and a sort of a recognized art movement? Is that what you're asking about?
I guess really specifically to the idea that it would be something where it's based on self-identification rather than like a critic driven definition.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely. That's actually a really good distinction, a really important distinction, because if you don't self-identify in that way, no one, it's very problematic for someone else to put you in that context. One of the things that's so difficult with this is that there's no master narrative, right? So, and that's part of why I sort of right up front said that my responses were very, very subjective. The question you're asking, Colin, is it's a good one, but it's a little hard for me to contain that question because it gets into the larger arena of what an artist claims versus what an artist achieves and who gets to decide. And so I can sort of slip into that vortex pretty easily, and I don't want to do that. But I will say that I agree that in this specific instance, I think an artist self-identifying as part of that community of people who use technology to create and express emotional experience, that makes a lot of sense to me, basically.
So Roz, let's hear from Roz. If you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. Shimon, is that how I say your name?
Perfect.
Yes. I just wanted to say it's really not a question. I'd probably have lots of them later, but I just want to say how much I appreciate your work. Not too familiar with it, maybe just wasn't in New York at the certain times or whatever, but one thing I just want to say, what I appreciated so much about it is the multiple levels that it works on. Content, concept, technology, beauty, art. And I even put in my comments, I mean, it's, well, obviously Huck, we think of literature, but there seems to be a literature and a narrative in your work. And I've often just, if we're going to be in this world of art and technology, I just think the bar needs to be higher where things are working on multiple levels. I mean, of course, there's a lot of experimentation, but your work really just, without even seeing it myself up front, it just took my breath away. And I love the multiple levels that it's working on and that it does have feeling and content. I loved, when I saw those people who came out of the dark and became realized, it's like a novel, we become realized with them. So I sometimes talk, I used to talk with a friend of mine who was an editor for Smithsonian in both dance, music, and editor at large for art and science. He's really quite an Einstein kind of guy or a Renaissance man. And we would often talk about the fact that digit means touch and touch means feeling. And I just felt that so much looking at your work, and I really appreciate it. And you're looking so intently at the work, the works you picked. I'm sure all of us, depending on our own particular obsessions, would pick various works, but I just want to thank you. Thank you.
Sure, you're very You're very welcome. I wanted to just, I wanted to circle back to one thing really quick, if I may, because I think I could say it better. To Colin's earlier question of me, which is that the best person to speak about an artist's intention is the artist. No, that's where the artist is the captain of the ship. So everything else is up for grabs. But in terms of what the artist intends, they're the best person. They're the only person who can really speak about their intention. So I mentioned that to say that, therefore, my answer to your question is a resounding yes. It's the artist. It is the artist who has the largest right to say, yes, I intend to use technology in this way. I want to be part of this community.
I see Ellen has her hand up.
Yeah,
Ellen Wiener, if you'd like to unmute.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Attie and Helen and Colin. It's great to see you all. And I love going to the show. I have a question for you, Shimon, which is this. I'm going to generalize a little bit, but I noticed that a lot of the work you chose to talk about in terms of the show basically resembled paintings. Some of them were a little bit more configured digitally, but you know, I think of paintings as something that we see in a gallery space, a museum. It's very much a sort of one-to-one view. It's almost a private viewing. And yet your work, the presentation you gave us, involved work that was very, very public. It was spectacularly public and community-based work. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your views in your work or in the show between what is private and what is public.
God,
Thank
that
you.
is a great question. Wow.
Yeah, really.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Well, I kind of, you're gonna probably kill me for saying this, but my very first instinct is I kind of want to refuse the binary, you know, and to say that there's a zone, there's a zone when work is really, really resonant, right, on multiple levels. It can be both public and private, and without a really clear distinction between the two. You know, when you think about really, really strong personal work, right? Like where the content is really personal, it's about my family, it's autobiographical, etc. But like really strong work of that nature, like I think about like Larry Sultan's photographs of his family, for example. They resonate in a very, very public way to not just his family, but our family, my family, millions of families. So that's, I mean, I think ultimately that's where that's my response, basically. That said, if you were to probe a little deeper with a couple of follow-up questions, I would say that I kind of do, and forgive me for saying this, but I don't want to sound self-deprecating, and I don't mean it in that way. But there is part of me that feels like, who cares about me and my own, given what's happening in the world? Like, I could care less. I mean, why should it's not about one individual artist, right? It's about larger stories and challenges and ethics and making a better world. So
it's actually a great lead in to a question I have in the chat from Emily Schilling, who says, could Mr. Attie talk a little bit about what he's working on now and what current technologies or technological developments are inspiring him or sparking ideas and or possibilities? Are there projects you're conceiving that are technologically impossible, but bookmarked for the future?
So that, well, the last part of that is easy to say, no, not at the moment. I know, I mean, I have projects, but not that are technologically impossible. But I mean, I suppose I should address what I'm working on now briefly, which is a really, I'm laughing only because I'm afraid I'm going to be run out of town, but I'm doing a really wild project in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I'm artist in residence this year at Lehigh University. And they're sort of commissioning me to make a new project, which they're going to exhibit when it's finished. And I knew nothing about Bethlehem before I was approached with this opportunity. I only knew what probably most of you know, which is like Bethlehem. You hear Bethlehem, you think Bethlehem steel, history of the American steel industry. But Bethlehem is much crazier than that. I mean, it's much more layered and very off-color, dissonant ways. It was founded in the 1740s by the Moravians, a kind of utopian Christian sect from Europe who were kind of ahead of their time in certain ways. They were like a socialist. They were a bit like an Israeli kibbutz. The men would live with the men, the women lived with the women, or how kibbutzim used to be. The children lived with the children, the widowers lived with the widowers, and there was a socialist economy. And then that gave way to some other things. And then there was Bethlehem Steel and industrialization for 100 years, and then post-industrial collapse. The steel industry imploded. Bethlehem Steel was was the company town. It was the company of the town. So massive unemployment, devastation, you know, Rust Belt, capital R. And lo and behold, in comes the late Sheldon Adelson from Las Vegas, who died last year, who owned the Sands Casino Corporation. And he bought up part of the ruins of Bethlehem Steel and turned it into a gambling casino. So really, really curious history. And there's I'm almost done, don't worry. And there's on the hill of Bethlehem, for those of you who don't know, I didn't know, there's a 90-foot star that's illuminated in white LED lights that's visible for 60 miles in every direction, like a white Christmas star. It's actually like a Moravian star, but it's a Christmas star. And so I'm creating a piece that involves, I worked with the architecture and design departments at the university. We created an exact clone of that star, but it's like 12 feet tall instead of 90 feet. And instead of having only white lights, it's sort of jerry-rigged to be like a hybrid between a Christmas star and a Wheel of Fortune, like in a gambling casino. And then there's a 2-channel video. It's a multimedia installation with video and sculpture. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm very happy to say I'm almost finished. It opens September 13th in Bethlehem, and they're also publishing a monograph on it with Black Dog in London. So that will be nice. So but it's not that even the technology of the star, the lighting design, it's nice. It's not that complicated.
But it does what you want it to do. It gives you the effect you're after.
It does.
Like any technology, it's a means to an end. Otherwise, it's just a machine or some process that is an end in itself. And that's obviously not Techspressionism.
Right, exactly.
Well, Shimon, I know that you have to run away. You have something else that you've got to do. And we really appreciate your participation in this and your very provocative and really meaningful conversation. So I hope that everyone will get a chance to see the exhibition in person, as Shimon did. He saw all the works in the show, and it's on until July 23rd. So it's going to be at the Southampton Art Center, the old Parish Art Museum on Job's Lane in Southampton. And even if you don't get to see it in person, you will see many, many things online that Colin has posted about the show. And I really thank Colin for all the hard work that he's put into this. And you are the captain of the ship, by all means, take credit. But they've done a magnificent installation as well. So thanks to the people at Southampton Art Center for being such great partners on this project. And we hope to see you all for our fall Art in Focus series. Thank you, Claire, for being our good shepherd at Stony Brook. And thank everyone for being here tonight.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.